Hey folks, how you all doing? It's time for another rankings video. This time I'm going to be ranking the he's had 10 studio albums, but 8 of them I'll explain shortly why I'm not doing the last 2 he's done. So the 8 studio albums by Creedence Clearwater Revival singer, writer and guitarist John Fogerty. I have already ranked the CCR albums in another video, so I thought I would rank his solo albums as well. I only have one on vinyl, strangely enough, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So the reason I'm ranking 8 instead of 10 is that I'm not ranking his 9th studio album, Wrote a Song for Everybody, or Everyone, Wrote a Song for Everyone, which was released in 2013, because that is a covers album of John's own songs, CCR solo songs, where he's got guest artists duetting with him basically for the most part of the album. So I'm not doing that one at all. I don't like covers albums of people's own songs. And also his 2020 album, Fogerty's Factory, which was recorded by him and his family, and it's a covers album of Cosmo's Factory, which is never going to stand up to the original anyway. Plus, I never bothered buying those 2 albums simply because one's a covers of a covers album and the other's a remake of a classic CCR album, which is never going to stand up in my opinion. So we'll do the 8 studio albums by John Fogerty other than those 2. So number 8, I have this one, John Fogerty and the Blue Ridge Rangers, Rides Again. This was released in 2009. It's his 8th studio album. This album is a covers album basically, except there is one of his own songs on there. So he's covering the likes. So it's a country album. So he's covering the likes of John Prine, John Denver, Rick Nelson, Buck Owens, Ray Price, and the Everly Brothers, to name a few. So it's a who's who of mainly classic, real country. The album features guest spots from Don Henley on one track and the boss Bruce Springsteen on another. There's a cover of his own song, Changing the Weather, which was on his Eye of the Zombie album from memory. I don't think it was on Centerfield. I think it was Eye of the Zombie. That's pretty good. He's reworked it into a country style. And look, overall, it's not a bad album, but by no means is it a great album, but it still comes in at a passable 6 out of 10 from me. At number 7 on my list, I have his 5th studio album, Blue Moon Swamp. This was released in 1997. As I said, it's his 5th album. I guess most people, if they know any songs off this album, it would be Rambunctious Boy or Hot Rod Heart. But the whole album has that distinct swamp rock CCR soulful groove throughout. Best track for me is actually the acoustic love song, Joy of My Life. It's one of the greatest songs he's ever written, in my opinion. And it's a love song, heartfelt ballad to his wife, Julie. This album would have been number 8 on my list had it not been for Joy of My Life, which just lives it above the one I just mentioned, the Blue Ridge Rangers Rides Again. But it still comes in at a very, very good 7 out of 10. At number 6 on my list, I have his 7th studio album, Revival. This was released in 2007. This is, I call it his political album. There's a lot of politically, socially commented statements on this album. It's an angry album. John Fogerty is angry again. There's rants on here against George W. Bush, and the Iraq War. It's his most aggressive punk sounding album ever, really. Think of the hit single Fortunate Son from CCR, and that's the vibe of this album. It's politically charged. There's also tributes on here to the band Cream and Jimi Hendrix, and there's also one about swamp rock, which is the name given to CCR's sound in the late 60s there. So I guess Revival is a apt title, as it all goes back to 68, 69, I guess, So it's a revival of that style, that sound, and the way he was feeling back then. 7.5 out of 10. Number 5 on my list, the Blue Ridge Rangers. This was his debut solo album. This was released in 1973. It's a country covers album. There's hints of gospel on here as well. It features a plethora of all-time country classics reworked the John Fogerty style. Yeah, they're just really solid versions of great songs. We've got She Thinks I Still Care, Jambalaya, You're the Reason, Working on the Building, which is the gospel one, Today I Started Loving You Again, Have Thine Own Way, Lord, another gospel spiritual song, Heart of Stone. Absolutely great album. Now, I'm not a fan of covers albums, as you know from my channel anyway, but this is really good. It's not a great album by any means, but it's a really good album. Comes in at 7.8 out of 10 from me. Number 4 on my list, we go back to 2004 now with his 6th studio album, Deja Vu All Over Again. It's just a solid album of Fogerty songs, basically. There's a guest appearance on here from Mark Knopfler playing lead on a couple of tracks. Mark Knopfler's style and sound really suit John Fogerty's sort of country-esque, country rock, bluegrass sound, so it blends really well. If it wasn't for Mark Knopfler's sound on this album would probably be number 5, and Deja Vu All Over Again would be number 4. But yeah, this fits alongside his albums really well, including some of the CCR stuff. So 7.8 out of 10. Up to my top 3 now. This one will surprise people. A lot of people I've seen rankings of have this album really low. But I don't. This was actually the first album of John Fogerty that I actually purchased. Which is why it probably still means so much to me. So yeah, Eye of the Zombie, 1986. It's his 4th studio album. At the time when I bought this, I had no idea he was a member of Creedence Clearwater Revival. You just don't. That's the way it is when you're youngish. I know I was 19 or whatever, but I didn't even twig, and it wasn't till I bought it and my mum said, "Oh, you know, that's John Fogerty, right?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "Well, he was the lead singer of Creedence Clearwater Revival. You know that?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." And it just didn't twig. I know who CCR was and Tom and John Fogerty, and it just didn't click. But anyway, this one comes in number 3 on my list. It's heartland rock, it's Americana, it's country rock crossover, very similar to Centerfield, the album that preceded it. But it's not quite as good. Lyrically and musically, it's quite dark and gritty in places. One track, Changing the Weather, that's the covers song that was on one of the other ones I mentioned a while ago. That has a swampy, grungy, soulful CCR sound. But all these albums, they're distinctly John Fogerty simply because of the guitar style and his voice. His voice is CCR. His voice is what it is, and you'll know who it is anyway. This album comes in at a solid 8 out of 10 for me. Number 2 on my list, that leaves 2 albums. Any fans of Fogerty are going to know what 2 albums are coming up. And this one is the only one that I own on vinyl. I only picked it up a couple of months ago, actually. John Fogerty. This was his 2nd post CCR album, or his 2nd solo album. It was released in 1975. It's called John Fogerty. The original title of this album was supposed to be Old Shep. That's his dog down there. Dog was named Shep, and he wanted it to be called Old Shep or Shep. Record label didn't like it, so it was a self-titled album. It's a rock, country, rockabilly album. There's 3 covers on this album. The rest are originals. The most notable songs on this are Rockin' All Over the World and Almost Saturday Night, which were later covered by Status Quo and Dave Edmunds respectively. I really like Dave Edmunds' version. I of Almost Saturday Night. That's the equal of Fogerty in my opinion. Status Quo, never a fan, don't like them, don't even like their version of the song. But yeah, I know Richard McCook would disagree with me on that. He loves the Status Quo one, doesn't like the Fogerty one. So we're poles apart with that, but overall we're fairly similar on our music tastes, I think. I do love his cover of Jackie Wilson's Lonely Teardrops on here. It goes on for almost 5 minutes as opposed to the 2.5 minutes of the Jackie Wilson song. I'm a big fan of Jackie Wilson. Not many people seem to cover his songs, but excellent, excellent song. A lot of people, again, do not like this album as much as I do. But I do. I think it was because it was his first songs that he was actually writing himself post CCR. I think they're really good. He was blowing the cobwebs out and getting back to it, and I really, really do like this album. Again, comes in at an excellent 8 out of 10. Which means my number one album by John Fogerty as a solo artist has to be Centerfield. For a long, long time, I wouldn't say I was a fan of this album. If I'd have done this rankings video, I don't know, a few years ago before I even had my first channel, this probably would have come in around 4th on my list. I Have the Zombie probably would have been number 1. So things have changed, things are slipping and changing. I guess it's musical tastes over the years. But yeah, Centerfield, this was released in 1985. It was his 3rd solo album. It was a decade after this one was released, so we had a decade break, I guess, with all the legal stuff he had to do and involved with CCR. He needed that break probably. It's Heartland rock, it's Americana. This is up there with the CCR albums in my opinion. I'm not saying it's as good as the 2 or 3 best CCR albums, but it would fit nicely among the collection of their albums without too much fuss. Contains the baseball homage song, title track Centerfield. There's other CCR sounding songs on here. Rock and Roll Girls is another one. That's probably one of the tracks most people would know as well. And obviously the excellent bluesy Old Man Down the Road, which I actually purchased as a single back in the day as well. A lot of people my age weren't buying that sort of music. I wouldn't say I would have bought a lot of music that were bluesy like that, but I did love that sound and song. And again, I wasn't aware who John Fogerty was, which is really weird at that stage. I know who CCR were, but as I said, in the I Have the Zombie one, I wasn't totally aware who Fogerty was. But yeah, that song would have been a great CCR song as well. So yeah, you've got, as I said, you've got the title track, you've got Rock and Roll Girls, you've got the Old Man Down the Road, and they're not even standout tracks on this album. The whole album is of equal quality in my opinion. It's just a fantastic album, 8.5 out of 10. So there you have it, folks. Just a quick rundown of my CCR albums, and John Fogerty albums, and where I would rank them from my least favourite to favourite, notwithstanding the 2 latest albums. Wrote a Song for Everyone and Fogerty's Factory, which I have no intentions of ever getting. Anyway, guys, leave your comments in the comments section below. Are you just a fan of CCR? Or are you a fan of John Fogerty as a solo artist as well? There's really not much difference. His sound is CCR's sound. So if you like CCR, you should really appreciate some of John Fogerty's solo material, especially Centerfield, and probably I Have the Zombie would be the 2 I would generally go to for people initially, and then you can pick what you want after that. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe, take care. All for now. Catch you around, and bye, folks.